coach to come in.
2-2 in Los Angeles, and we're here on Sports Hub STL City Hub postgame presented by HotShots Sports Bar and Grill, and of course, DraftKings. The crown is yours. A big night in LA. St. Louis City puts 2 on the board, but still only leaves with 1 point. I'm Matthew Rocchio. That's Will Bratton. And we're going to be breaking down the game for you right here on Sports Hub STL. If you want to jump into this, you can on the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe to here on YouTube and let us know what you think about this game. Will, your opening thoughts on the game?
My opening thoughts on the game are pretty simple. St. Louis City SC scored 2 goals. A lot of people are going to be very happy about that. That's the first time that's happened in a while. And, with 6 goals or something like that on the year prior to this, it's a step in the right direction. But what you don't want to see is an amazing goaltending performance coming out of Ben Lunt that goes, sort of to no avail, left, wanting more with more or less a defensive disaster class in a couple of key moments from Josh Yarrow and Kyle Hebert. So those are my 2 biggest takeaways immediately.
Yeah, I mean, the chaos of the game is something we got to talk about. But at the same time, we talked about getting in the comments. So get the comments in early and often, and that's what will drive the show here. Samuel Howe comes in. A draw. How disturbing. It is what it is. And I think disturbing is one word for it. I don't know if I would use disturbing exactly, but it's not what you want to see if you're a City fan. And I completely understand that thought process. But considering they are one of the best teams in the league in LAFC, and putting 2 goals on them and forcing it into extra time for the deciding moment, it's not the worst. It could have gone a lot worse is all I'm going to say. And it looked like through the first half that it was going to go a lot worse. And overall, it was defensively one of the biggest struggles across an entire game. I tweeted it out, and it stands. It's the second most XG that City has ever allowed in a game in 2+ years, the most being 4.2 against the Portland Timbers last year. 3.74 is what I'm looking at on FootMob. I think it's around 3.7, 3.8, 3.71 actually, excuse me. But still, Eric Sontag, Sports Hub STL, host on the Domesticated Gamblers. I'm about to drive and won't be able to chat, but wow, what a game. I feel like Ron Burgundy in a glass case of emotions. All in all, are you happy with this result? I'm going to let you answer that one, Will.
In the end, if I was told it was going to be a 2-2 draw before the match, I would have said, all right, cool, thumbs up. We'll take it. Point on the road against a good team, a team we've never beat before, never even scored against before. If you tell me we put 2 on them and escaped to the point, I'd be happy. But when you watch that match and the way that it unfolded and the storylines presented in that match by itself, I leave that match very unhappy with that result. I think City deserved a highway robbery in that match because, you don't expect St. Louis City SC to come out and have a performance like that, sitting on the back foot in the first half and really changing the pace in the second half. A lot of people around the league are not going to expect that from St. Louis City SC to really turn on the Jets in that second half. But when you get stellar goaltending, you've got to back that performance and hang on to those types of results. You have 2 leads in that game that you give up and you only escape with 1 point when you really deserved 3 in a match that on paper you maybe didn't deserve any. So, for me walking out of that match, there's definitely something left out there on the pitch.
Yeah, and that's completely fair, but you played so bad in the first half, and I have a lot of criticisms for why they played bad in the first half. We can get into that if people want to, but I mean, again, you're playing a team that's one of the tops in the entire league. You only played a second half. You somehow scored 2 goals. You scored a second goal when you were down a man. You didn't let them completely run over you when you went down a man. In fact, you again did take the lead, and then Bouanga, I know that was an incredible goal, and people want to complain about the defense. But at the same time, just an insane shot from Bouanga. You actually didn't get beat. You had enough defenders on who were able to recover and play some good defense. But that was an insane shot. He did the thing that he had to do. And I know some people are going to take the angle of, well, that's what a DP striker is going to do. And that's completely fair as well. Samuel House says road points are good points. And that's another thing. A month ago, I think if you told people you were walking away from some of these games with points, I think they'd be pretty happy. The fact that you're getting 2 points from the Whitecaps game, the leader of the conference and what second place in the conference in LAFC. So that's 2 points from those 2 games is something that I imagine people are feeling pretty good about.
I completely agree.
Some people
like
are
I
going
said,
to be monstrously negative no matter what. But 2 points from those two games, take away the look from it, that's pretty good. The intricacies aren't great. Again, 3.7 xG. You actually allowed more xG in the second half than the first because of the penalty that obviously Ben Lund saved. You're not going to get that very often. So there's a lot of things to criticize, but there are some good things. All in all, it's just disappointing because they were able to score 2 goals in a game where they only played 45 minutes. And it's just disappointing to, again, not see City play a full 90.
Yeah, and this is a theme that we've really seen a lot. Is it's very sporadic where we get little bits of offense in these St. Louis City SC matches so far this year. So for me, we one thing I did like though was we saw an adjustment that was made, a very very clear adjustment that was made in that second half, switching to essentially a 4-back to try and get more value out of Toyshirt, who has notoriously struggled in this 3-5-2 system under Olaf Melberg so far. But did have a lot of success when he joined St. Louis City SC last summer in that 4-4-2 type of system. We switched to that, and immediately it pays dividends with a Toyshirt goal and a couple of other opportunities that were generated through him and around him. So, I like seeing these adjustments. I like seeing the attack getting going a little bit. There's a lot of positives to take away, but positives to take away aren't really as fun as getting 3 points. But when you get any points on the road, it's always at least a partial victory. So it's hard to complain too much about the overall circumstance. Now, if we want to get into individual moments and players and criticize that type of stuff, I can talk about that all night. But there is certainly nobody out there who is perfect by any means.
To Samuel Howe's point, they did go down a man. Alfredo Morales took his second yellow card around the 82nd minute, late in the 82nd minute, I guess it was, and that meant they were down to 10 men, and they were still able to score that kind of junk goal. What kind of was an own goal? It went off Nielsen's back. I'm sure he'll get credited for it in some way, shape, or form potentially. So yeah, I mean, it was a scrappy game. Nigel Stoff says, I'd be happier with this result on the road if we can somehow win games at home. They haven't been great at home, but they also, they've been getting points at home at the same time. And so obviously you're not happy where St. Louis is right now. 1-2-2 at home, 1-1-2 away. So you're right there, Nigel. That's not what you want to see at home. They got to be better at Energizer Park. And this hasn't been a good stretch of the season matchup-wise, but you got to be happy with 2 points from these games. Let's dive into the specifics of how they happened again, which is the defense is great, except for the fact that as solid as he is in big moments, the good ones, Kyle Hebert also has as many correlated bad moments, where if he has 3 big tackles, he's going to have 1 or 2 big bad moments where he lets up a goal. And the fact of the matter is, in multiple games now, Kyle Hebert has gotten caught in ball watching and gotten beaten on by 1 step when he should have been in a better position. Yaro's gotten the same thing. He got caught ball watching and then he gets beaten by a step. And in this situation that leads to a penalty, it doesn't go in, but nonetheless, those plays still matter. And so that's a little disconcerting. But it also is what it is when you're playing guys that and to plan at the beginning of the season weren't going to be starters. But now you're starting to get people healthy. Joachim Nielsen's getting healthy. And so maybe you can continue to improve in that fashion.
Yeah, and I like to see Nielsen coming off the bench there and getting some minutes in that match. And I thought he played well. Obviously, getting a nice fluke goal for the second time in LA in his MLS career is always nice. If anyone recalls his absolutely iconic bike against the LA Galaxy in a 3-3 draw thriller last season, of course. But it's good to see him back. Timo Baumgartel, it was not his best match, but I wouldn't say he had a terrible match by any stretch. I would still say he had a good match overall, but not his best. Seeing him get more minutes and continuing to improve is a great sign. When you got Tomas Totland coming back, that's awesome. And Giannis Horn putting in a good shift. Obviously wasn't fit for 90 there, but you get good minutes out of him, including an assist on that first goal that really could have ended up being a goal for Joao Klaus or Cedric Toyshirt, who were both kind of right on the end of that ball. And it falls to Toyshirt, who just buries it. And those are things you love to see. So definitely growth and healing. We know Roman Berkey, the captain, not only just a great goalkeeper, but a leader in the back line, a big voice in the back line, is also on the cusp of returning. So there's definitely a lot of good things that can be expected to come in the future based on the trends kind of shown in this match. But, I agree with Gabriel Eames there with frustrating end. He said it feels like we can do everything right, but we fall apart in the final minutes far too often. And this is something that we've seen,
They didn't fall apart on that goal. That's
no,
there were, and I know, and this is the thing. I'm glad we're going to take the full scope, which is they allowed a lot of last second things, but at the same time they were a man down, and you kind of have to throw pretty much every minute that's played for both teams with 10 men. You just got to throw it out the window. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make no sense. There's no consistency to it. It's not a real part of the game, in my opinion. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate, but I just think, we got a comment on Twitter here. It was Patrick Carmody said that dude can bleep and ball. Tough way to end it, but happy to leave LA with a point. That's a really good team. They battened down the hatches pretty well for going up against one of the best offenses in the league with a man down. It's just that Bouanga put in a perfect shot in that moment. They had 4 guys back, and he just right over everybody.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I do agree with that. But when you're, I'm specifically on the first goal against, you can't be caught ball watching in that situation. You can't. Those types of breakdowns, whether it's a team breakdown or an individual breakdown, like the mental sharpness, that cannot happen. You have to be clinical in those moments. You cannot lose Denny Bouanga at any point in the box, first of all, but especially in a moment that big, no matter who's on that back post run. Kyle Hebert cannot lose his man, and Josh Yarrow. I would have loved to see him be able to square his body and just deflect that ball away because it clearly wasn't going to his man, and he kind of just watched it go by across as well. So
we got a comment here, and I'm bringing this in from Twitter just because I want to get this going as much as possible. Hot Corner STL, you can give him credit for the goal. He's absolutely sick, but still blame the defense. Yarrow can't turn his back inside the box, and Baumgartl got caught pinching over too far and flat-footed. His positioning was horrible. All right, first of all, you're talking about, okay, if we're going to criticize a guy's positioning once out of 90 plays, fine. Baumgartl had a solid game to your point. It wasn't his best match to Matt Z's point, but it's just the positioning. Like they had 3 or 4 bodies back in front of Bouanga. Everyone got back and forced him to cut back in front, and he didn't like slice through it after that point and dribble through people. They took a step back, and instead of stepping up and taking him away, he put it right over their heads. But I don't think Baumgartl not pinching or pinching too far is what bit him that game. You're overanalyzing a play where a guy did, superstar stuff against a non-superstar defense. That's just kind of how things are going to go sometimes.
I still think it's a little preventable because such a good recovery run was made by like 4 St. Louis defenders were able to get behind that ball before.
But they recovered. But the point is they did recover, though. Am I wrong?
Yes, but when you get all 4 in front of the ball, in this
that's problematic.
Get up there and block that shot.
Yeah, you want somebody to step up, and maybe that's what his point about Baumgartl being.
Yeah, I think that is what his point.
Maybe that's his point.
And I would agree.
That is a woof. If we're really going to get into the nitty gritty, let's get into the nitty gritty. I'm down for it. All right. You know what? Do me a favor. If Hot Corner STL is listening right now here on Sports Hub STL, City Hub post game presented by HotShots, Sports Bar and Grill, all the games, all the time. Hit me with a screenshot. I'm big on screenshots. I want a little. I can't go back and watch the game right now. I'm trying to listen to the post game. I'm trying to do this. It's a lot of things right now. Hit me with a screenshot. I actually am going to turn on the post game and try to go find that moment. See if we can pin down exactly what he's talking about here on my extra screen. I got so many screens right now. Let's keep
definitely know what he's talking about. And I think he's right. I want to see what you think once you rewatch it.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys there, and that's completely fair. I just think that, man, we're getting into the nitty gritty, but I'm okay with it. Let's get into if you want to get into the nitty gritty, we'll keep getting into the nitty gritty. Doobie. I feel like I got to do this more like musical. Doobie doo doo. This team is not going anywhere. I'm sorry. They are stuck in neutral and can't get any better. My issue with that statement is that they have gotten better over the last month. So how do you square the fact that we've seen improvement over the last month with your statement that they're stuck in neutral and can't get any better? They've gotten better over the last month, or else they wouldn't have gotten a point against Vancouver. They wouldn't have gotten a point against LAFC tonight, and they probably would have gotten absolutely hammered by Columbus Crew more than 2-1. It would have looked a lot more like losing 2-0 to a bad Kansas City team. But you can't tell me that the last 2 weeks is the same team that lost 2-0 to Sporting Kansas City. It's not the same team.
It doesn't look at all like the same team, you see it in the body language of the players too. Players are feeling a little more comfortable in their skin. We've got more guys than only Celio Pompey willing to take a guy one-on-one. We saw Watts with a good run down the right side near the end of the match. We saw Betcher even trying to do the same thing. Giannis Horn, Kyle Hebert, these guys all taking guys on and winning these one-on-one duels. So it's definitely a more confident team, and we've seen in the defensive performances, and now tonight with a little bit of the attack getting going, as well as the goal against Columbus, that the attack has been getting a little bit better as well. So, but I do agree, getting a little bit better kind of feels like being stuck in neutral. But at the end of the day, I think St. Louis City SC are going to continue to improve when these injured players continue to come back. Of course, Edward Leuven, we did finally get word that he may be returning to team training this coming week. So that could be a game changer with, him and Roman Berkey, two of the biggest leaders in the locker room outside of Marcel Hartl, returning to the team. So things could definitely look very different in about 2 weeks' time.
We getting some tweets from the post game? Yes. Okay, cool. We are seeing some tweets from post game. Sorry, I haven't done a good job. My headphones are not giving me a good connection here to my phone, and so I wasn't really able to hear Olaf Melberg. So if we can hear later on in the post game, we might go. A couple of the very hardworking media members were doing a couple, not live tweets, but a couple live summations. No one out there but me and you doing the live tweets of the full press conference, Will. So then we come in here and we're not getting full quotes. No, there's no full quotes out there. What we need is full quotes, people. Come on. Help us out. Gabriel Ames. Let us know how you say your last name, Gabriel. I don't want to keep screwing up. Cool first name. I got to know how the last name is said. I think it's Ames. Ames. Let me know how it is. I'm also Drew Young, photographer extraordinaire and board op extraordinaire over at KMOX, sent me the highlight really quick from MLS Soccer to take a look at. And here's my thing. Criticizing
Are we
Yarrow
talking about that second goal?
Yes. Criticizing Yarrow for turning his back when it literally was the motion that forced Bouanga to cut back inside is 100 the definition of you're making a dumb nitpick there. Baumgartel gets caught flat-footed because he literally tries to turn around and he's 6'2" and his hips don't work great. So it's not really a fluid motion for Timo Baumgartel right now. And so he doesn't get caught flat-footed so much as he doesn't exactly turn like a ballerina. And then I guess it's who the heck's jumping up here and trying to make a play on this. Nielsen steps up and tries to make a play on the ball. Bouanga just gets it. Just puts it in the one spot where he had to. Yeah, we're nitpicking this one too much. It's an incredible goal. I'm with Nigel on this one. First goal is very upsetting. Yeah, we can pick that one up all day long. Second goal, you just get outclassed by the tip. You got to tip your cap to that one. Yeah, I'm looking at this one frame by frame right now on Twitter. Drew sent it to me. Will, and yeah, there's little things. It's not the best defense, but it's not excusable, but you can break it down and see that everyone does essentially what they're supposed to. Yarrow turns him back around, forces him back inside where he knows he has help. Baumgartel's that help, but he's playing a little bit hard towards the touchline. He turns around, still is able to force Bouanga to take one more step before he takes the shot, which then Nielsen steps inside, gets his foot in there, but Bouanga is able to rip the shot off. I think we're doing a little bit. There's a lot to criticize in those final 20 minutes. They got 2 or 3 other attempts in those final 5 minutes of extra time after you took the lead. Those are criticizable. That's one thing we always run into is don't just get caught into the one play where everything went right or everything got screwed up. Did you make 20 mistakes that led to that where the one mistake led to a goal in there? And did you do 20 good things that led to your goal in there? That's the big question. And that's why there's a lot of criticizable moments here for City. And if you are doobie-doo-doo and you are very negative, as I try to keep a straight face as I say that, and you think this team's stuck in neutral, then the things you want to focus on is that were either of City's goal today repeatable? One of them, certainly not. One of them, kind of, Cedric Toyshirt makes just a glorious touch inside the box. But
I'd say that goal is very repeatable.
But you move to a four-man back, and I think what that did is it moved Toyshirt more inside, which we know he likes, which we know is better for him, and that put him right where he needed to be, where he was essentially a second striker with João Klaus picking up that far cross as the second man. That's a repeatable goal, but it did take a crazy touch to finish it. But the second goal is not repeatable at all. And then if you look at everything that happened for LAFC, they scored 2 goals on 3.7 XG, including having a penalty saved. So you play this game out 10 more times. LAFC probably wins 3-1, 3-0, the majority of those situations. So that's why, to the negative side, there still is a lot to criticize, and why City is sitting at the bottom half of the league this year, and why I don't know if the ceiling's much more than a 7 or 8 seed.
Yeah. I mean,
that's just numbers at this point. At this point, it's going to be hard to win as many points to get more than that.
Right. Yeah. When you're sitting with 1 point per game through 10 matches, 10 points, I mean, it's just not good enough if you want to be, a top 4 team in your conference. Of course, there is still 24 matches left where St. Louis City SC could, realistically, make up a lot of ground, but I don't know if that's something I necessarily foresee happening. I think City are definitely going to find their footing a little bit, but they're not going to make some miraculous recovery and end up at a 2 seed or anything like that. So I definitely agree with you there.
We get a chat here from a very passionate City fan, Daniel Guevara. Do you guys think Yaro should have made a professional foul on Bouanga on his second goal? And I think what he's talking about is when Yaro had a chance right before Bouanga pulls away outside of the box. Yaro does have a chance to potentially take him out with a slide. Yeah, I think that's probably something that when they watch the tape again, they're going to say, you know what, make the decision in the moment. But they're also already a man down, and you're wondering if that's going to be a little bit risky. You take that, you're 2-man down. They get a set piece with 10 on 8. That's going to be a little bit hard. So yeah, you're probably right. More often than not, I think you do want him to take that foul. That's a good point.
Yeah, honestly, I think you just got to trust the player to make that call. Josh Yaro is a speedy guy, and if he thinks he can catch Denny Bouanga and force a situation for him to cut inside and cause problems, kind of like he did, to be honest with you, then I think you let Yaro try and hunt him down and just pray that your other center backs are going to get back and make a good recovery run to kind of negate that play. But if you're not trusting in Yaro's speed, then yes, 100% I agree. You're taking that professional foul if you get the opportunity to ideally avoid, a yellow card with it, but most likely you're taking a yellow in that situation if you're going to foul. So did STL City win? Comes in and says, we should have gotten a pen in the 96th minute. Joyner
we got to answer the first question. No. Second question, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I'm not really sure on the Joyner play. I didn't ever see a replay of it in the moment. I didn't think it looked too egregious. So honestly, I'm not sure. Rock, what do you got?
Yeah, I would have liked the call, but it probably would have been kind of ticky-tack. They didn't give us a replay, didn't slow it down. Did he get ball before he made contact? Did he make contact before he got the ball? Twellman in the moment said it was a good tackle, so I think he might have gotten ball. That's something I wanted to go back and rewatch, but I have not gotten a chance just yet. Something I wanted to touch on here, Eric Sontag. We saw 2 distinct styles of play in the first and second half for City. What do you guys think is the ideal style for City to play? First of all, I did want to bring in Melberg said, this is from Matt Baker STL on X or Twitter, however you want to call it. Melberg said the halftime change came after Ostrak said he was tired. Not that his legs were gone. He maybe could have gone 10 or 15 more, but they thought it was a good idea to change. The change from 5 to 4 in the back was to get more options centrally and more options to build. Talked about that with Seti earlier. And he credited Ben Lund for a phenomenal performance. I thought there might be something in there about the really crappy first half. So my thing about I think formation gets overblown because they've played a back 4 at times in certain phases of buildup and transition this season, specifically to get Wallum up forward. And so they didn't have Wallum this game, but they did have Giannis Horn. And I think that's why we didn't see more back 4 over the last few weeks, is that you would have had to play both Hebert and Watts as your fullbacks, but now you got Horn and Hebert or Horn and Watts, which I think is just slightly better. So I like that we saw it a little bit more. It obviously worked getting the goal. You heard the point there from Matt Baker tweeting out the synopsis from Olaf Melberg that it got things a little bit more centrally. In the past, that was Wallum kind of contributing to the midfield. This time it felt like it was more like we were talking about Seti getting centrally and contributing there. I just don't think there's that big of a difference in the actual fundamentals of what we saw them do in the first two halves. Specifically to the formation. I just think the goals was the same. It was just a couple different players doing a slightly different role in slightly different positions than it was in the first half. And it opened things up because those players doing things in different roles were better fitted for some of those roles. Celio Pompeu came on and opened things up. That's a huge factor. If they just bring Pompeu on and run the formation they ran last week, things probably open up in not a similar way, but things probably open up in a different way, but they still open up. And so I don't want to make too much of the shift of formation wise in the two halves. What about you, Will?
I would honestly, I think that it does have a little larger impact than you're letting on. I think it changes the dynamic of what the players are planning to do when they get the ball each time. And especially in transitional moments, because in that 3-5-2, in transitional moments, you don't really have wide options up the pitch. In that 4-4-2, when you're defending in that situation and you do force a turnover and you win the ball, you usually have at least one option on the width that you wouldn't have had in that 3-5-2 because your fullbacks are so deep. So I think it changes a lot. And we saw this with Akil Watts too on the right-hand side. Simon Betcher played him or it was Celio Pompeu, I think maybe played him a through ball down the right-hand side after like a corner on some weird transition that saw everybody out of position. But it resulted in almost a good scoring opportunity for City. And I think that really changes the dynamic. I think it's much more appealing in build-up, like you mentioned, with Cedric Toyshirt. But of course, we've seen this a little bit at times, even when running the 3-5-2 of shifting to get Volm higher up the pitch and allow Toyshirt to kind of come more centrally. So I think it definitely has a little more implication than, that we should just ignore it. But I don't think it was completely game altering. But to answer the question that Eric posed, which do you think is the ideal style? Under Olaf Melberg, I'm going with that 3-5-2 all day. I just really want to see a little more dynamism in that.
Because it's a two. It's a two up top, which is still puts Seti centrally, or if it's not Seti, then it lets Celio do what he wants to do. I just continue. Finish what you were saying. Sorry.
No, you're good, and you're kind of hitting on what I was just about to talk about, which is like up top. It's kind of similar, but in that 4-4-2, we get a little more value out of Toyshirt. But I'd rather just see the 3-5-2 under Melberg. It's well coached. It's good defensively. And just be a little more fluid, a little more dynamic, so that Toyshirt can get inside when we have the ball. And City ideally aren't just giving away a bunch of terrible unforced turnovers like we tend to do like every match. It feels like
they did for the majority of the first half.
Exactly. Basically the entire first half. I mean, 0.03 expected goals to 2.18 is completely and utterly shocking. And that's pre PK. This is only first half for St. Louis there. So those aren't trends in the right direction. But if that 3-5-2 can be a little bit fluid and utilize the width a little bit better, especially in those transitional moments, I think that's the best formation for City to run.
Yeah, and for me, I know that it's a big difference today because of the formation, but in the first half, 0.03 expected goals for City, one shot on target, 0 big chances qualified by FootMob. In the second half, 1.39 XG, 10 total shots, 5 shots on target, and 3 big chances. I don't know how many games they've had 3 big chances this season. It might be just 1 or 2. The other LA game where they scored 3, I think that might be one of the only ones where they've had. Yeah, where they've had 3+ big chances. So I mean, that's a huge difference once you put Celio Pompeu in, and that's why. And I know that Cedric Toyshirt scored a goal, and so this is going to be a big process versus results thing again. And I said it, even if they scored a bunch, I'd still criticize it, and I'm going to still criticize it. Why is Celio Pompeu not starting the game? And if it's a factor of he's only you only want to play him for a half, well, clearly Ostrak was only good for a half. So I'm not, why was it him playing the first half and Celio playing the second instead of the other way around? I think against a team that good, you wouldn't want to let them get anything going in the first half. And so he was so impactful. It surprised me, but maybe the thought process is, and I'm going to ask Olaf this on Tuesday, maybe the thought process is we want him as our killer in the second half to change a 1-1 game or to put the pressure and put the final, the nail in a coffin on a 2-1 lead with another goal. Maybe that's the thought process. And if it is, fair. But the bottom line is you can't see the two differences between those games and not acknowledge how important Celio Pompeu is to this team. And so I have a little bit of an issue with him not being in the starting lineup because I just think it sets the tone. Then you got to change everything at halftime. And I think that credit to the team for coming out and proving me wrong and being able to completely switch things up and doing it in the second half. I just think it makes more sense to put your team on the front foot in the first half of games and then try to lock things down and kill games in the second half. I think that makes more sense. I think it's easier for the mindset. I think it's easier on your goaltender and things like that. I just think it's better. And with Ostrak's possession and progression, I think that makes sense as a killing thing, or that also makes sense as something in a tie game or if you're down 1-0, that makes sense as a thing that can put you ahead more so than just that one-on-one, which is a little bit riskier because you're going to be wasting possession. So I love Cedric Teuchert, and I tweeted out the quotes from Olaf from earlier this week about building him up and getting him involved. And so maybe that's what we saw from him today is he finally got involved. He finally felt comfortable. He finally found that touch, and they found him more. There were first halves last week or weeks before where Cedric Teuchert would finish a first half or a 60-minute spell with 9 or 10 touches. And at 60 minutes tonight, he had like 17 touches. And so they did better. They got him the ball more. But it just shocked me to my core that Celio Pompeu didn't start this game. And I think that's why you saw them just stagnant in the first half, is that the one thing that pushes this offense is a guy like Celio Pompeu. And that's why they got Zane Silva, because he has that same kind of mentality. And if some of these players are only good for 45, that could also possibly be on them. And if I don't know that, that's on me. But it threw me off, and it threw the team off in the first half, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it comes down to what Mellberg's trying to accomplish at the end of the day. Do you want that second half surge? Do you want your creative players going against tired defenders and you're trusting your defense? Or do you want to come out the gates like a bat out of hell and try and score early and really put the pressure on the opponent? Historically, City have not been great in parking the bus late in matches. So I understand a little bit of maybe wanting to do a second half surge rather than a first half press. But for me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to not have Celio Pompeu on the pitch when Joao Klaus is on the pitch at, like fresh legs out from the jump. It doesn't make a whole ton of sense to me. And I think it just comes down to mentality for Olaf Mellberg. Are you playing, confident that you can score early in this first half? Or do you feel that your team needs time to settle into the match in the first 45 before you kind of put your killers, your goal scorers in there to go kind of cut things up? So I'd definitely be really interested to ask him a question like that. And kind of hear what he's thinking, because I think that really determines it. If both those players, Celio and Ostrak, it's known that they're playing a half each, right? I think that's what it comes down to in the end is what's the mentality with the team for who starts which half.
Yeah, and that's completely fair. I've been wondering about the 3 forwards versus 3 midfielders look, and they still kind of played that same 5-2-3 if you want to call it, that they've been playing the last few weeks. So, and again, I don't want to get caught up too much in formation because I think positioning is more important. And I think it was clear what they were trying to do with the switch they made, which is, and I'm okay with that switch. I tweeted out the interview I did with Marcel Hartl before the match today. I think it's clear that he wants to be further forward. He wants to be closer to the box. And I think City's better when Marcel Hartl, being one of your most dynamic players, is in the best spot for your most dynamic players, which is at the very top of the box or in the box. And so I understood the point of the move. But for me, it's just, I know he scored, you talk about players who have an impact on this game, it seems like it would make more sense to go back to what they were playing to start the season, which was more of the 5-3-2, and go with Celio and Klaus, and then go with a 3-man midfield of Alfredo, Ostrak, and Hartel, and attack that way. That, I think, puts in all the players who have shown that they deserve a chance, and it all fits. And I'm not saying Seti didn't deserve a chance. I'm just saying that compared to everybody else's numbers, Cedric Teuscher was not putting up the same numbers everybody else was. Now, there's the internal discussion. There's what they see at training, and there's what they see specifically in what LAFC allows. For me, breaking down the numbers, one of the only weaknesses you can see when you research LAFC is that they get dribbled on. And it's probably because with all these things, you have to think about how much of these stats are things that, they're letting teams do. When I say letting, you know what I mean, which is everything's a balance. When you're really good at something, it's going to leave you a slightly more vulnerable in the opposite. So is it just that because they're so good at dribbling and they are the best dribbling team in the league and taking teams one-on-one, that it just leaves space open? And so that naturally is going to be something maybe they're not bad at it necessarily. Bottom line is they let teams dribble a lot against them. And so how do you not have Celio Pompeu in off the bat? And the fact that he played a second half, there are a lot of potential ways for Olaf to break my argument on Tuesday, and I hope he does. I hope that was the plan. But I was still thrown off by it, and the fact that they were so bad in the first half and so solid in the second half has to be highlighted by that.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, the second half was just, it felt like a completely separate game. I really felt like I traveled in time and was watching, a second meeting against LAFC at a later date, because both teams were really playing a little bit different of a style. LAFC had figured out by then that St. Louis were really struggling with the direct ball. So basically everything was either a straight line dribble or just like some direct ball to Denny Buenga trying to get in behind, or Olivier Giroud before he was taken out. And for St. Louis, you saw the obvious adjustment, switching like to the 4-4-2, like we talked about, and trying to find ways to get value out of Teuscher, who did get more value in that second half. And I still feel in the end he hasn't gotten enough like time on the ball through his minutes on the pitch. So there's so much back and forth with it.
Yeah, and that's fair. And by the way, Matt Baker at Matt Baker STL on Twitter doing another good job of tweeting out some synopsis here from the post game. He's talked to Marcel Hartel, some of the things we were just talking about. Will Marcel Harder spoke post-game tonight and said that they gave the ball away too easily in the first half, but talked at halftime were completely different in the second half. Said Seti's goal is the perfect example of what this team can do. I would agree on that one. Hardell said when Celio came on, he played a left wing, left striker, as we talked about, and he, Marcel Hartel, dropped to a 6, also something we've talked about. They knew Seti's quality, and they tried to get him 1v1. This all sounds familiar. Quote unquote, if we can find him and get him options for 1v1, he'll help us for sure. All sounds very familiar. And Hartel noted the second half especially gives them a lot of positives to analyze and take into Seattle next week. Finding teammates versus kicking it away when you are under pressure, but coming back from the mistakes and dealing with them. I do want to comment on two of those things, plus the final thing he noted from Mellberg, which is the second goal. Mellberg said they shouldn't have turned the ball over. They shouldn't have lost it in transition like that. Why are we passing? Why are we lollygagging on the ball and looking to pass it backwards when you're in the attacking third and you're up 2-1? That is a microcosm of just some odd decision making by City this year, where they're not playing things on the front foot. And the funny thing is, everyone wants to criticize a manager who's defensive in his mindset, and yet he's the first one to say we're playing the ball back, we're playing on our back foot too often. And so I agree with everything that Olaf had to say about that play. Your thoughts on everything that Hartel had to say, from his positioning to the importance of Celio to the complete lack of any continuity in the first half.
Yeah, I think the lack of continuity in the first half doesn't even need to be talked about more, because it was just outright bad. And
crappy.
It sucked. Celio's impact as that left striker, left wing kind of deal. I love that position for him. First of all, I think that's his most effective position. It lets him get those one-on-one opportunities with the back line. He doesn't have to screw around with the midfield trying to play passes, just create 1-2 situations just to get his one-on-one. He's already there. If the midfield does their job and they get him the ball in threatening positions, obviously he has to do his job to get open, but That's not as hard at that left wing striker thing as opposed to playing, like a true left wing. You know what I mean? Where he's a little bit tucked in, a little further defensively. He's not as much of a high outlet pass in those situations, or a flick for Joao Klaus if he's the target on those outlets. So I completely agree there. I love that position for him, and I think he can completely change a game, as we've seen since he's been, playing lately. In terms of Hartle dropping as the 6, it makes sense. And I want to see him higher up the pitch. And I know, Rock, you and I have talked about this. And in the end, like,
he's confident he's confident he can impact there, but he also thinks that if you watch all his tape, he does his best work higher up the pitch. So take from that what you will.
I want to see him higher up the pitch with a St. Louis City SC team who are struggling in the attack. If the attack gets going and City are dumping in, 1 to 3 goals every single match,
that's not going to happen.
Right. No, but that's my point. In that situation, I would be fine with Hartle dropping in a little bit. But when he's not, when St. Louis are not doing that and getting that level of offensive production, I want Hartle up the pitch. He's our best playmaker, especially with Leuven not on the pitch. He can take guys on in the midfield. He's got a nice shot. That's a guy you need high up the pitch. And St. Louis City need goals. And when he's a higher up the pitch, we've seen more goals in the last few games. So, that's kind of where I'm at. But obviously you want the player to be comfortable. So there is a piece of that as well that you have to consider. But
I don't know what to take from this, Will. This is insane. LAFC had 9 shots on target. City had 6. LAFC had 50 touches in the box. City had 8. Okay. That's goofy numbers, people. That's goof troop bullshit right there. All right, that makes no sense. This isn't a real game. I honestly might have to disagree with Marcel Hartel that there is positives to take away from the second half. I don't even know if this is real, what we just saw, because that tells me, and I'd have to break it down minute by minute to see if there's a huge disparity break in the touches. But Denny Bouanga had 17 touches in your box. You had 8 in theirs. As a team, he doubled you up. I know he's incredible. I know you're not good at offense. That's ridiculous. That's inexcusable. That's not the defense having a good game, even if you take away his incredible shot making. He's incredible, but that's really bad. That's really bad. That's okay. Really bad.
The one redeeming thing I'll say is how many of those touches were completely harmless opportunities where City were just completely containing the game.
It's one of the best players in the entire league touching
the ball not his. Out of LAFC's 50.
Oh.
Out of LAFC's 50 touches. How many of those were
And that's harmless? Also, to your point, there is something there, which is they only got 9 shots on target on 50 touches inside the box, which means
that's redeeming partially.
You got numbers back, you're batting down the hatches, and you probably blocked a ton of shots. I'm trying to find
you blocking into shooting lanes, and that's so important. You got to stay square to the ball, and St. Louis City have done that very successfully in 2025. So
that's just
slightly redeeming, but that's just a ridiculous 50 touches in your box.
Yeah, and maybe this is a complete game with Tomas Totland, but is it?
I don't think it is. I don't think anything changes. I think it's a different game with Henry Kessler. And this might sound crazy, but this is a crazy shout. I think this is a very different game, and that's a different number with Tim Parker. Just any kind of enforcer in the box that's extremely physical. I think it's a different game.
To Aaron E's point, volumes create opportunities. Opportunities create goals. That's exactly what I'm saying, Aaron. Any other game, play this thing out 10 times, play it out 100 times, play it out 1,000 times. City loses that game 3-1, 3-0, 4-0, almost every single scenario. And so, yes, there are some positives, but I'm gonna grind into the sum part of that one here.
Yeah.
Just the fact of the matter. And again, it's only positives from 45 minutes because were you impressed with the defense in the first half? No one scored, kept a clean sheet. I don't know how. Were you impressed with the defense in the first half?
On certain plays, yes, but overall, no, because there were a few
certain plays
inexcusable
Exactly.
moment on
Certain
that back
plays
line.
don't matter because you could if there's 100 instances where you got to defend and you screw up 2, everyone's walking around St. Louis saying you suck.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I will say, what part of that do you think also comes from the attack being when we did have the ball, St. Louis did nothing with it in that first half. So what part of that, pressure on the back line do you think would have been alleviated had St. Louis done anything with the ball when the back line did force turnovers or even the midfield forced turnovers?
Yeah, I mean that's going to change the game completely. To your point, we're talking about LAFC had 415 passes in City's half. City had 62 in LA's half. It's tiring mentally, I'm sure, just as much as it is physically to have to defend that many passes, defend that much movement, and defend moments that are that critical over and over and over again. To have to put together 36 clearances is just an insane number, and the defense was able to do it. So again, I don't want to. They got through the bad moments, and that's
Why I'm
it.
trying to say
Part
that
of
we
it.
can't dog on them completely.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like some moments they were very good, and they completely shut down some really good looking opportunities that LAFC produced because they are so good on the ball in the final third. And so there are moments that you can give them a pat on the back for, but for me overall, I'm not satisfied in that first half.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be satisfied the first half. The first half
No.
was utter trash. Let's let's just look at some of these numbers. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. In the second half, you allowed 2.12 xG, you produced 1.39 xG, 5 shots on target, 3 big chances. So again, all the offense for City is coming in the second half. You had 37 passes in the opposition's half. You had 7 touches in the opposition box. They had 30. So even if we just look at the second half, 30 touches to 7. From those 30 touches, they produced 5 shots on target and 9 shots inside the box. And now, in fairness to City, City produced 5 touches and City produced 5 shots inside the box on 7 touches inside the box. So there, you know what? There are some good things to look in here. You're creating an insane amount of shots on target for the attempts you're getting. That's something that hasn't been true the first month or 2 of the season. So there's your silver lining. We'll roll with that.
It sounded like a very defeated "there's your silver lining."
Well,
Aaron E says we desperately miss Kez, Totland, and Reed in a match like this.
I like that he mentioned Reed.
Yeah, that's a fun one to talk about. And he is very close to returning, by the way. He's been training with the team on the ball, I believe, this week. And so that's, good to see, unrelated from performance, but just as a human standpoint, you love to see a guy getting healthy and getting back to the game. Obviously missing Kessler in that game that's a very obvious one for me. I think at least one of those goals doesn't happen if you have Kessler, if not both of them. I don't think the PK happens if you have Kessler. So, there's definitely a very big gap there missing with Henry Kessler. Totland, I'm not sure how much defensive impact he would have had just based on the way the match played out. And same with Reed.
I was going to say, if people think that Totland is going to make a better play than Hebert on spec, yes, but there's also no one I think still on the roster who gets beat back post like Thomas Totland does. So
yeah, well, except Jay Reed last year. Except Jay Reed last year, he was the victim of the back post bomber. I wrote about that a million times. Dude, his game was so good last year, and then just back post bomber, back every time. That was driving me up a wall.
Yeah, getting beat back post by one of the best strikers in the entire league. That one's always gonna hurt a little bit.
It's gonna sting.
But here's how you soften the blow. You turn some profits with our friends at DraftKings with Pick 6. It's baseball season. It's officially underway, and it's time to step into the plate with DraftKings Pick 6. Think of DraftKings as your fastball right down the middle. Not like you're throwing a fastball, though. Think about they're throwing a fastball right down the middle. Like an Adam Wainwright at the All-Star game versus Derek Jeter kind of fastball right down the middle. So you can knock it outside the park. The easiest way to play for cash and take a shot at a big win, just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Cash in with your baseball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly and just a $5 entry. For the Cardinals in their next game, we're going to put together a pick 6 really quickly right here. I'm going to go with Brendan Donovan higher than 1.5 total bases, more than 1.5 total bases because he's Brendan Donovan, and that's what he does. And also, I'm going to have to go with a little bit of Wilson Contreras. I've been riding the opposites on Wilson Contreras because I just think eventually the numbers have to turn in favor of Wilson Contreras. So I think I'm just going to keep on rolling with the Wilson Contreras more on the 1.5 total bases. He got me with it. He got it with me the double the other game. Not so great today, but nonetheless, tomorrow we're looking at that Reds matchup. I'm going to go with Wilson Contreras, and we're going to go with more on hits allowed for Nick Martinez, the right-handed pitcher. I'm not scared of righties when it comes to this Cardinals lineup. I'm terrified of lefties, but Nick Martinez of the Reds is a righty, so I'm rolling with that. That's our pick 6 that we just put together on DraftKings Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports right there on the screen for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Put together your play today. Better payouts, better wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
All right, guys, we're hitting almost the hour mark. If you got any more questions, get them on to the screen, onto the YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe here to Sports Hub STL. Make sure you're notified every time we go live. When we go live? Well, 10 a.m. every morning with the Randy Carricker Show featuring Brooke Grimsley. Every day at some point in the afternoon talking about Cards Hub on Cards Hub 365. And then after any event in St. Louis, Cardinals, Blues, Battlehawks, St. Louis City SC, we're going live. The Billikens, we're going live with post-game shows just like this. Speaking of back post, why did City not have anyone there on multiple corners, set pieces? That was something that Taylor Twellman was criticizing them in the broadcast. Alex Langer does a really good job as both the goalkeeper coach and the set piece coach. I'm going to keep this is one of those ones where I defer to somebody who's proven to be really good at their job in the past. And so I'm not sure why. It defies convention, though. And so I have to think there is a reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's 2 very simple things. It's communication and coaching. I mean, if we're talking about on the attack, on attacking set pieces and corners, because I did actually notice that on, I think, 2 different occasions where there wasn't really a definitive back post runner. That's communication and coaching. If you're looking at defensively, it is the exact same thing. It's communication and coaching. The goalkeeper should be putting that together. The main voice in your back line, I would assume, would have been Timo Baumgartel in this match. He should be communicating with Lunt, and the 2 of them should be orchestrating that entire defensive set piece. So there's no excuse for that. That shouldn't be happening. You need somebody. Maybe you don't have a guy shoulder to the post. Not all teams want to play like that, but you need somebody in that vicinity. And I mean, it's got to happen. It's communication and coaching.
Yeah, I'm terrible at setting up my set pieces on Football Manager. So I'm just gonna this one I got to give to Alex Langer. He apparently, according to Ben Lunt, they kind of knew what Bouanga was going to do based on on the tape that they were watching. So I mean, the guy saved the entire goal working with Ben Lunt. So and he's got a lot of points for City in the past. So it's either one thing, to your point. It's either a massive mistake by City or that 100% that, or there's something going on, and maybe we can ask. We can ask if we can talk to Langer this week and see if we can figure out what the I guess sorry we got a chat I wasn't expecting. We got to figure out what was going on there. Gabriel, and I need to go up further.
It's Ames.
Ames, yeah. I just want to make sure
I said it's Ames. I saw that.
Gabriel Ames. Gabriel Ames is an awesome name, by the way. Like, are you like did you used to win like Deadeye shootouts in the Old West? Gabriel Ames sounds like a guy who's got the fastest guns in Kansas City or something like that. Gabriel Ames, what are your first choice starting 11/formations when healthy? Well, it's pretty simple that, and what are your first? We'll go with what we think they would do and what we think makes most of the sense, because that's how I think it's the only sensible thing to project. So you run a 5, some combination of 5 and 5. So Giannis Horn, Henry Kessler, Joachim Nielsen. Yeah, I'm gonna run with that right now. That's your back 3 with. Oh crap! Hold on a second. Let me.
You want Baumgartel in your back 3?
Yeah, I'm going to restart
on your way.
Well,
okay.
I'm gonna because I kind of forgot you still. We don't. I would say Jay Reed, but we don't know what he's going to be yet. Kessler, Baumgartel, and Nielsen is your back 3. Vollum and Horn as your wing backs. Leuven and I guess Morales as your center midfielders. And then my attacking 3 from there, I'm going to go with Celio, Hartel, and Klaus. That's my best 11 as it stands right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that, to be honest with you. The only thing that is interesting is throwing in Morales into that midfield. So,
well, I mean, who else are you playing at the 6? I'm not playing. I don't think they're going to play. I don't think they're going to play Leuven and Ostrak together or Leuven and Hartel together. I don't know if Durkin gets his spot back when he's 100% healthy. I think right now it's Morales in that spot. Well, I mean, not next week because he got a red card, but
yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about Ostrak getting in there?
I liked it, but I think it's clear that what it was, which is just we need somebody. We need somebody in the Leuven role, and we got to try to punch Hartel up. But I think right now, as it stands, the best decision today, in my opinion, and for this team, is Hartel plays as a 10, and you have 2 strikers with Celio doing his left wing striker combo. That's where I think it makes sense, is Morales, Leuven, Hartel, because you need a defensive mid in a holding 6 like Morales or Durkin. You need that in the system. I just think it makes sense. It works with the balance. You don't want Hartel or Leuven having to do that full games. You want those guys being your deep lying playmaker and your forward attacking midfielder. And so that's why I think that's the best starting 11. What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think I would just switch Ostrak in just because for Morales.
Who put him in?
Morales.
Okay, so how you're telling me this team is going to go from playing 2 6s and being super defensive with their center midfielders to saying, to hell with this whole entire idea of defensive midfielders.
Basically, 2 10s.
Come on. But it's not happening.
But when you have Vollum and Giannis Horn as your 2 wingbacks that are so defensively reliable, you can get away with that without the holding if it's played correctly.
But Wallum isn't gonna. But we know that Wallum isn't going to be a very defensive wingback. We know that the plan is, if Wallum's one of your wingback, then that's one of your primary avenues of offense. And so that's why you need to, because you saw from the quotes I had from Hartel, when he's playing that deep 6 or deep 8, however you want to call it, he's thinking, okay, the winger just got up, I got to drop back and cover. So if you have Wallum and he's that primary avenue of offense, whether he's on the left or right wingback side, let's say it's the right wingback side, then you need that holding midfielder to take over that spot and shift things around. I think it works every time. I mean, it works in the balance. That's been the listen. You might not be wrong. That might be the leap they need to take. But do you think they're actually going to take that leap?
No, probably not. No, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But I mean, I don't know. With Baumgartel being able to step up into that midfield role a lot of the time, I really think that it could be really effective to have your Hartel, Leuven, Ostrak midfield kind of trio, upside down triangle almost going on there. And I think that could really help Toysher get value too, having 2 guys who can distribute to him.
It's ambitious, and we haven't seen something like that yet, so I'd just be a little bit surprised because of that.
No, I don't think it's gonna happen. I just think that's something I would be toying with.
Well,
for
let's
sure.
you gotta balance out what you want to see with what you think they will
Well,
see.
I only did one crazy player in there.
All right, fine.
Well,
Ernie says Hebert starts every match, though. Yeah,
that's a
but
good point.
if
We've
everyone's
totally
healthy,
forgotten that.
he's not in your starting.
Melberg's gonna start him. He's gonna start him.
No, he's not.
It's gonna happen.
Melberg's not blind to the ball watching that gets caught every once in a while. He's not gonna.
Jaro's gonna also start too. This is a sad reality that you're gonna have to wake up
to. We really think that if he has a completely healthy Nielsen, isn't a thing that exists. So that in and of itself is kind of breaking this entire argument, isn't it?
It's a good point. That's like trying to bank on a healthy Rasmus Alm too.
Who's that?
Who, by the way, was upgraded to questionable this week, and we could see him next week for like the first time in ever, maybe. So,
and what just happened to Thomas Tolland? Exactly.
Yeah, right. Wait till Friday. Everything's gonna change on Friday, like it always does.
Every time we get on Friday, something changes. Somebody gets hurt. They were talking about today. Taylor was again talking about that on the broadcast. He's not letting that bone get away, and I don't blame him because it is an oddity. Today was different with Wallum getting knocked out. I think they said he got bumped in the eye, and then it was concussion protocol and all that. So.
Yeah, I saw him pointing to his eye with the trainer, and the trainer was like doing the concussion thing, and he like stopped him for a second. And he was like, "I think I have a bump on my eye or something like that."
Let's give. I guess we should. If we're talking about some positives, since I was being so negative earlier, which I'm sure some people enjoyed, because after the first half, somebody tweeted at me and said we needed to really hold Lutz and Olaf accountable because of how bad the team was playing, which is fair.
Yeah.
They did do all that good work in the second half without Conrad Wallum. And I'm not sure there's a 45-minute stretch this season outside of the first game against Colorado.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a 45-minute stretch this season where they've created 139 of XG without Conrad Wallum. I just don't think that exists. And so the fact that they were able to do that in the second half with just the Celio and the positioning switch, formation switch, and without Conrad Wallum, that is impressive. You do have to give some credit for that one because there's not a lot of stretches of good offense that weren't happening for this team without him out on the field. And so him being completely absent and getting that, it's something. It's something.
Yeah, I completely agree. Conrad Wallum has, been very, very good outside of, one match where he wasn't quite as great for St. Louis since joining on this loan. By the way, his loan does run through the entirety of this season, and then St. Louis City SC will have the option to purchase at the end of the loan. We'll see whatever happens with that in the winter time. But one thing I did want to ask about and talk to you about was I saw a comment come through the chat earlier that we didn't get to that was talking about, is the seat of Lutz Pfannenstiel hot? And I think that could be an interesting topic to talk about here. For me, I don't really see it being hot at all at this current moment. But what happens if St. Louis City SC missed the playoffs this year, Ron?
I mean, people are going to be angry, but I think it would still be a short-sighted move to move on from Lutz Pfannenstiel. I think, especially a guy who's come in and has put so much focus and so much work into the academies, and the academies are finding so much success. You got to look at the full picture when it comes to Lutz Pfannenstiel. And let's just compare this to another franchise in St. Louis. The baseball is a full scale thing too, because you got to care about your minor league system, and the Cardinals stopped caring about the minor league system. And that is a huge reason that they needed to move on from the current leadership. You don't have that level of criticism. Yeah, you have the fact that things are stagnating on the field right now, but and he's saying if they don't make the playoffs, I think that would still be a little bit too early, considering they had to change coaches a second time. I think 3 years would be too soon. When City started, I was adamant that you had to give them a 3 to 5 year window on one, competing, and two, spending money, because they spent so much on the transfer fee, on the stadium fees and the expansion fee. that it was going to take them, one, banking some money, or two, making some sales of their own. And they've only had like 2 sales. Nico Gioacchini and Indiana Vasiliev brought in, over $1 million. So they need a 3 to 5 year window. And so you can say that, hey, then fine. You say 3 to 5 years. I'm making my decision at 3. I'm more partial to giving them the 4th and the 5th year. That's just me, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I think the whole "let's out" mentality is very reactionary, and just like from a grand perspective of things, I think it's very immature when you're looking at the long term. So, and I talked about this on X. I think last week. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Anyone calling for Melberg to be fired 10 games into his coaching career in MLS is equally as ridiculous to me. Now, if things really continue to go poorly and Melberg doesn't have a hold of the locker room by the end of the year, then maybe you start to ask some kind of questions. But that's not any kind of a decision that any fan is going to know needs to happen until it happens and upper management tells us that it needed to happen. So, for me, I think patience is a virtue. I think the St. Louis City SC team are doing great things considering they've been around for 3 years. You win a conference in your first year. That's awesome. Obviously, first round bump in the playoffs sucks. Miss the playoffs the next year. That sucks. Right now, you're not in a playoff situation, but you easily could be. I believe if St. Louis had won this match, they may have actually been in a playoff spot. I'm going to check on that really quick. But yeah, it looks like St. Louis at 10 points, they would have not been in a playoff position. They would have been 10th. But, let's say hypothetically the VAR bug doesn't get you and you're 4 points higher than you are currently. Then you're in a playoff position. And that's without winning this match tonight. That also felt like St. Louis could have won that match. So I think it's very reactionary from the fans. I just the fans that are calling for the whole "let's out" and Melberg out kind of deal. So I don't know. For me, there's just no real basis to that argument.
Yeah, I just think it's, yes, Olaf needs to go. Will, patience. Okay, Bill DeWitt. It's a dumb move to fire coaches 10 games in. It's the height of stupidity.
Crazy insult. Call me Bill DeWitt.
You can't be dumber than that. It's ridiculous. If again, it was the very first comment we got. They're not showing any progress. You're wrong. You're objectively wrong. Of course, they are showing progress over the last month, which is what you want to see from this coach. I'm highly critical of what we saw in the first half, no doubt about it. I spent the whole first hour pregame just ripping into the lineup because they didn't have Celio Pompeu. But to say that this team is just at the point where you need to fire the head coach, I think that's a little ridiculous. You just took 2 points against 2 of the top teams in your league. You've played with 3 of the top teams in the entire league when you include the Columbus game. Yeah, it's not. There's a lot to criticize, but to take it to the point where you need to fire a coach at the 10-game mark, it's ridiculous. And frankly, it's soccer and hockey are so dumb when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I hate it. It annoys me. It rarely, if ever, works to just hack a guy 10 games into a season at that point. At least talk to me in June, like July 1st. I mean, that was a solid time to fire Bradley Carnell. This is come on, people. Let's be ridiculous. Let's be a little bit contained after a 2-2 draw to one of the top teams in the conference. A little bit. Come on, please.
I think St. Louis fans just are, biting the bullet with the Cardinals. Obviously, the Blues, it was a frustrating season until the last about 2 months. And so things for St. Louis sports-wise, obviously the Battlehawks losing, in a championship, I believe, last year, and all those kinds of things, they add up. And I think St. Louis fans are just really, really expecting nothing but greatness. And they're not willing to cut any slack right now for a St. Louis City SC team who won the conference 2 years ago. And, I understand the frustration. At this point, but again, I think it does. I think it set the bar high. I think it set the bar higher than is realistic, even remotely, for an expansion side that is 2 years and a month old. So I think it does matter.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. And Charlie Smith again. Who were those 3 knuckleheads that let that cat into the box and scored the 10-yard line? I want names. Well, if you were watching the game, you should.
Josh Yarrow,
yes.
Kyle Heber, Timo Baumgartel was in there. Joachim Nielsen was in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty much
Heber
everyone on defense that you're angry at after that play.
Yeah.
He's one of the best attackers in the league. Probably shouldn't be let him get into the box 17 times, like we were talking about earlier with the ridiculous box touches. There's a lot of negatives from that game. The entire first 45 is crap. The entire back 20 is not great, except for a fluke goal that goes your way. There's a lot to criticize there, but at the same time, you took draws in games that everyone was penning down for L's. 2 points out of the last 3 isn't ideal, but it's better than the betting odds would have given City if I had to look again. And so there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot to improve on. And the bottom line is if they don't start pulling some points away in groups of 3 with some W's, then they're not going to make it in the playoffs. And now they start an absolute gauntlet of a schedule. They play in 6 days, which is normal, against the Seattle Sounders. But then things get very unnormal. 4-day turnaround from there to face Union Omaha. You get to play a light schedule because they changed some of the roster rules. So now you can use more of your young players. So that's a good thing. But still, nonetheless, you're going to have to use some of your starters in that Open Cup game. And then you play again 3 days later against San Diego UFC, who rocked your shit last time you played them. Then you play again another just 4 days later against Sporting Kansas City, which will, correct me if I'm wrong, but also rocked your shit the last time you played against them. And then you go away just 3 days after that. Yeah, it was rough. We got to talk about it, though. 3 days later, and you're away against Minnesota United. So it's a pretty rough stretch. The quality of teams drops a chunk, but the schedule then becomes a whole nother opponent. So the depth's going to get tested. Gabriel Ames' question from earlier probably isn't going to be relevant for the next 2 weeks, probably until
starting. Just whoever's a fit.
Yeah, his game. Yeah, that question's not going to be relevant until May 24th. The next time they play like a normal game, because things are going to get switched. Guys are going to be starting. Guys, starters are going to be coming off the bench. They're going to be not even appearing on the roster probably. Things are going to get really wacky and really goofy. Yeah, the Aaron E. home versus Austin, home versus Colorado produced 1 point. That's bad. That's where you're dropping 4 or 5 points, and you got to say, holy crap, this is where we lose the season. 100%. You didn't play bad against Colorado, and if you would have won that game, man, the start of the season would have looked pretty damn good. But home losses, home loss to Austin and the draw against Colorado, bottom line, not enough. The points, not enough. They have to, just not just that, potentially 7 matches in 21 days. It's a lot. So does the depth help? Does getting Edward Leuven back change things, if it in fact does happen? Does putting in Tomas Ostrak change things around? Does getting healthy on defense solidify a defense that is starting to, while still be good, starting to see some cracks form in some of the play? All that's a big question for me. Do they get more offensive players involved? Celio Pompeu, Tomas Ostrak, Marcel Hartl. Do we see him playing further, closer to the box? A lot of questions for this week, a lot of questions for this next month. And we're going to be diving into them every week here on Sports Hub STL with the post-game City Hub STL. So any final thoughts here before we close things out, Will?
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on Aaron E's comment is just, that Colorado match, you dominate a little bit. You don't get any goals. You end up 0-0, giving up nothing defensively whatsoever for the most part. The Austin match...
You allowed an XG of 0.2 in that game against Colorado.
Which is insane. I mean, that's an amazing performance. You got to win that game at home in front of your fans. I agree. But if you're looking, just based on the standings and the performance of those two teams, Colorado and Austin are the 3 and 5 seed teams in the conference right now. Those are good opponents. It's not like this was Sporting KC and, I don't know who's at the bottom right now. Probably Portland's pretty low, I would think. They haven't been playing great lately, but 2 lower teams in the table at home, and you're getting 1 point out of that.
Montreal. No, Galaxy, sorry. Yeah, Galaxy and Montreal at the bottom. Yeah, the Canadian teams suck except for, obviously, Vancouver. Toronto and Montreal at the bottom of the East.
Yeah, and it's not like, you're not getting any points against those teams. They're 2 teams that have been doing good on the road. Obviously, Austin had the second best defense in MLS for like the first 8 weeks. I'm not sure I don't think that's still true because Vancouver put 5 on their head, but that's just kind of what Vancouver does. But anyway, the point is, it's been very, very close margins.
The only team they've lost to outright who's out of the playoff position is Sporting KC.
Yeah, and that's a bad loss. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and it's a bad loss, but if it just they have not been, they're not dropping trash right now. They're not dropping, they haven't caught L's to the bottom half of the conference for the most part. They dropped points against, not really the bottom half of the conference. They've really only dropped points to Sporting Kansas City. Everything else is to the top half of the conference. And in the East, they've dropped points to
Columbus,
top of the conference.
Who's leading the conference?
To your point, Will, you're actually right. When you look at strength of schedule and how they've played against these teams, they've only lost points against top half teams, which is, again, not a good sign if you want to be in the top half, because that's not going to be a playoff team. But they're not getting their teeth kicked in by the worst teams in the league, other than Kansas City in that one game, which a lot of this episode has just been, well, that you can hang your hat on that. It's not going to get you much, but you can hang your hat on it. So there is a bright spot at the end of the tunnel. Is that there? There might be a train, but it's bright right now.
Yeah, the train may run you over, but there's something bright.
Yeah, we're not sure if it's a light we're not sure it's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not sure if it's at the front of a train or not, but there's a light there.
Yeah, and that brings me to my final point to close everything up, which was just that, it's been such tight margins for St. Louis City this season, in a few matches that could have been complete momentum swingers for how the first 10 matches of the season could have gone. You think about Colorado, right? A 0-0 game where you dominate. And you think about the Columbus and Vancouver matches, and tonight's match against LAFC. All 4 if you count Colorado too, all 4 matches that you really feel like you should have gotten more. Had all of those been wins, St. Louis is near the top of the table and probably has momentum and picks up another win in one of the matches that they lost, So it's been tight margins for St. Louis. I don't think things are a dumpster fire in St. Louis right now. And I think, truly good things are to come. And I'm not just saying that to get you to tune in to the Sports Hub STL postgame show every single week.
And Aaron E's being very realistic, and I appreciate that. Yeah, Colorado and Austin have 9 wins and 20 matches combined. They aren't elite. Unfortunately, I'm going to break this to you. There's not a lot of elite teams in the Western Conference or really in the league. But to that point, if you go by XG goal differential for who's the best teams in the league right now, Vancouver's number 1, Nashville's number 2, Philadelphia's number 3. Number 4 is Minnesota, and number 5 is Seattle. So if you go by the hard numbers, still a pretty tough schedule that you're facing because Minnesota and Seattle aren't messing around. But hey, that's a chance to beat a good team. And if you're going to be a playoff team, you're going to have to win some freaking games against teams that aren't just garbage. You're definitely going to have to clean those 3 points against those garbage teams. When you look forward at the schedule for St. Louis City, they have some games against some not so good teams coming up. They're going to have to win those ones. When we look forward, we got Sporting Kansas City again at home. You got to win that one. Colorado Rapids, not going to be easy. San Jose Earthquakes, you got to win that one. Portland Timbers, LA Galaxy at home. Houston Dynamo away. There's a chunk there in June. We get into July. You face the Timbers, Dallas, the Chicago Fire. There are some games when we get into June and July where they can rip off some points, get some chunks of 3. But if you're 14, 16, 18 points behind the 8 seed, it's not going to matter. Teams are going to be able to outpace you at that point. So they have to win against the bottom, and they have to take at least 3. I know it's going to be tough, but out of Seattle, San Diego, and Minnesota, if they're going to be a playoff team, they have to take 3 from one of those teams, and they absolutely have to take 3 from Sporting Kansas City in between that. And it's going to be tough, like Aaron says, because if they win the Union game, they're potentially playing Minnesota again in a cup battle. So things aren't going to get any easier for St. Louis City, and they're going to have to stop winning these moral victories and put together a full 90 and take 3.
Yeah, I completely agree. That Minnesota gauntlet is definitely one to watch. And Minnesota's a very underrated squad in the Western Conference right now. So I'm excited to see how that pans out.
Yeah, like you said, Minnesota's definitely kind of surprising people a little bit so far this year. Where are they at right now? So plus, yeah, like when I'm looking at XG,
at fourth.
plus 5.8. They're literally just behind Vancouver and Philadelphia for one of the top numbers in the league. That's a solid team. They're going to be sneaky. It's going to be tough. But for all those games, potentially 7 in 21 days, that means you're seeing me and Will on an average of once every 3 days. I can't wait here on City Hub Postgame presented by HotShots Sports Bar and Grill. All the games, all the time. Your home for St. Louis sports fans since 1990. And, of course, DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Thank you to all our great chatters for sticking with us through this entire show. You guys were incredible. You make this possible. Like and subscribe right now on YouTube so that you get notified every time we go live. And then go ahead and follow me, Matthew Rocchio, at RockSTL. Will, how can they follow you on the socials?
You can get me on X at Will Bratton STL or on Instagram at STL City SC Views. And I do analysis on Instagram and more commentary, shorter form content on X.
You had plenty of time to get questions in this past hour plus, but if you didn't, that's how you can ask us some more questions. We'll talk to you later, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great day, St. Louis.